Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, the one thing that you can count on to always be in flux, and that is the sense of change. More so than any time in my life, right now, change is taking place so much more rapidly, and that affects every part of our life, including fishing. What took place last year might not be the same this year. I talked in another report about how this year there were snowbirds that were so plentiful in our area, and the impact that has. Well, the impact it has is to show that each season, as air temperatures change, as high water or low water flow changes, it can affect where the fish go and how they act. One of the things that seems to be very apparent is because of warmer water conditions, based on warmer average air temperatures, the time the fish are spawning is earlier now than it has been in years in the past. May not be hugely earlier, but there seems to be trends that, for example, the walleyes are staging up near the tributaries right now, getting ready to spawn at an earlier time than in the past. The same with bass. It appears, especially from people that have been out on the water almost every day and can give you these reports back, that the smallmouth are spawning earlier. I don't think we have as much information, we as fishermen and the social media means of communication that we do, I don't think we have as much information on the largemouth or some of the other species because we don't give them as much attention. But it's important to understand that this sense of change is a part of everything in our world right now. Everything. I'm just talking about fishing and its impact, but the changes are coming all the time. Tackle companies are trying to adapt to this, adapt to so much that maybe they never did in the past. You'd see the same lures every single year. There weren't many changes to any of the tackle devices that we use, but now it's changing all the time. To just give you a tiny little bit of that, with tournament fishermen going out in their boats, and if any of you have never seen a top level bass boat and how it's equipped, oh my goodness, first of all, they cost more than most cars. Second of all, they have everything in those boats for even just tiny fluctuations of change. So a lot of these guys have 30, 40 rods, and they have rod lockers in the boat. And each rod has a different reel and has a different speed of which it retrieves and uses a different line depending on how they perceive the fishing conditions at that time, how clear the water is, how cold it is, and so forth. But, well, let's just take rods as an example. If you're fishing where it's imperative that you feel tiny little changes, and this would be more like slow fishing if you're using jigs or even live bait, but let's say you're using just either soft plastic jigs or bucktail jigs or something. So you cast it out, and then you want to feel everything that's taking place, because a lot of times if you're using something slow like that, a fish will come up behind it, they'll inspect it, and within just a tiny bit of time, at fractions of a second, they'll open their mouth and there's a suction that takes place, and in goes that lure. And the only thing you might feel is a tiny, tiny little change, a tick. And so companies are devising rods that are lighter and more sensitive out of graphite so that you can feel, but also the type of braided line you use. And I'm saying braid because that's the most sensitive. There's changes being made to that so you can pick up even more sensitive changes. And we're not finished yet. Now they're using jigs with tungsten jig heads because the tungsten is far more sensitive or reactive to any type of tap or anything than what lead is. They're far more expensive too. But you take the whole package together and you come up with a certain type of tackle. Now let's go to the other extreme. Say you're using spinner baits or something that you go out trolling or you're reeling in fast. You don't need that same sense of sensitivity. You don't need the rod to pick up everything. You want the rod to be more flexible because you're moving. The lure is already moving through the water. What you feel may not be the reason you catch it or not, because you're going to have a sudden strike. The rod tip's going to bend, and the motion, the speed, everything is part of that, either reeling in quickly or trolling at a certain speed, is going to probably set the hook. And you don't want the rod too stiff that it's going to pull the hook right out on the fish strike. So you want it more flexible. And this is just an example of the impact of change. And it's not just the impact of change, it's the impact of the change in communication. We didn't have a lot of communication channels when I was younger. Now, social media plays such a massive role, and I'll talk about this more in another report. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.